Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time to get started here. The room's filling up nicely. So without further ado, we're going to go for it. My name's Josh Parry, Chief Marketing Officer at Cyrus. And we're back again with our weekly live episode on Fridays of Fighting Back Together. This is a show where we break down current events in the vacation rental industry and talk about different techniques and advice from experts in the industry, both from the technology side, the leadership side, and also from management companies themselves on navigating this new era together and learning as we go. So thank you to everybody who's joined us so far. We're having a great time bringing these sessions to you live every week, and we hope that you're all taking some value from it. So as ever, we certainly appreciate you turning out. Today's a really cool session. We actually have our first ever, I called it the mega panel, and I really do think it's going to be a valuable session because we've got experts from the technology space, from entrepreneurship, and also we've got two leading management companies who both bring unique perspectives from different markets into the conversation. And today's conversation is focused generally on pricing strategies and operational strategies in light of the global circumstances, and how we as businesses can work to remain efficient and set ourselves up for success as we kind of slowly now start to see states lifting restrictions and some things are going back to normal quicker than others, but it's a very rapidly changing landscape. So we'll see that shine through in the conversation today as we speak about both the technology and the operational teamwork side of the way that management companies are running their businesses at the moment. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Brian Hamawi, who's our Vice President of Product here at Cyrus, and he's going to throw it to our panelists. How's it going, Brian?
Hey, Josh, how you doing? Excited to be here again on a Friday afternoon. Excited for the weekend. And this is a pretty awesome panel we've got today. I mean, we've got some industry leaders and combination of technologists in the industry that are really doing some really cool innovations for our property managers. And then obviously we've got some really good property managers, leading property managers from their industry. So I'd love to introduce some of these guys so they can give you a little bit of background on what they do and what they've done for the industry and how they see things shaping up for us. Let's start with Eric. Eric, give us a little bit of background and we'll move on from there.
All right, Josh, Brian, appreciate the opportunity to come on today. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I mean, I've been focused on the vacation rental industry for quite a long time now. Actually, I kind of pivoted from the hotel space in 2005 when I jumped in with the emerging Wyndham Worldwide organization to help them create strategy around this on a global basis. But since then, I've had the privilege of starting one of the first dynamic pricing engines and exited that company, started the first aggregation platform, AKA distribution platform, and sold that. And frankly, in today's world, you know, I'm working with venture capital. I work in my own company where we do opaque distribution channels for supply, both on the condo, vacation rental, and hotel side. And I'm a member of a consulting firm.
That's awesome. Really good background, especially for this type of conversation. You bring different aspects of the business into the fold. So we're excited to dive in a little bit deeper with you into some of the things that we're seeing. Katie, do you want to give us a little bit of your background and what you're up to in the industry?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Rydell. I live in Seguin, Texas, in Central Texas, which is a very heavily touristed area of Texas, right along the corridor between San Antonio and Austin, right on the Guadalupe River. I have been in the vacation rental management and ownership business since 2009 for 11 years. I manage 15 units and I own 11 of them and interface with owners and guests on a daily basis. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us. Cam, off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hi, guys. I'm Cameron Bain. I work at Beyond Pricing, and I've been there for 5 years. Coming to Beyond Pricing was my first entrance into vacation rentals, so I've seen quite a lot of change over the last 5 years in terms of the proliferation of Airbnb and Booking.com as various distribution channels, as well as the prominence of dynamic pricing come to fold. So yeah, excited to be here in these topics.
We're excited to have you. It's one of the leading platforms in dynamic pricing. It's good to have you in this conversation too. Jeff, give us a little bit of introduction. You are a Florida property manager.
Yeah, we're native Floridian. Me and my wife started teaming vacation rentals about 6.5 years ago. We manage about 375 properties, and we have 4 locations in Florida right now.
Awesome. So I think that Josh introduces most of our panel.
Does.
You want to give us a little bit of a rundown?
Yeah, I actually, before we get into the panel itself, and we have some great questions both from the audience and also that we've sort of devised together, I just want to let the audience know that our questions box is open this week. I was scratching my head for a couple of weeks thinking, why do we not get more questions live on these sessions? I had a settings issue in the GoToWebinar account, so the questions box is open. I would love it if throughout the conversation, you guys in the audience would like to throw a question into the box. We also have several email questions that came in during the week, so we'll be throwing to those as well. I can't promise we'll get to every question. We're going to try and keep the conversation as focused and topical as possible, but I'll be checking the questions box as we go, and if I'm able to chime in with those questions throughout the conversation, I'll do my best to do that. So please post your questions there. Before we get into the panel questions, I just wanted to give a quick I guess you could call it a health check with Katie and Jeff, because I know that you guys both come from different backgrounds and you represent different demographics within our industry. Could you just take a minute to tell us, how are you coping? It's been a bruising few weeks for society at large, but especially in the industry. Jeff, if you just want to kick us off, just tell folks kind of what your operation looks like today and what your outlook is for running in the next couple of weeks as Florida starts to hopefully reopen and we negotiate with our government officials to keep vacation rentals on the forefront of that.
Well, of course, we had to let a lot of staff go. Everything blew up our best 2 weeks of the year, March 15th. Those coming 3 weeks were our best weeks of the year, and a bulk of our income comes from those 3 weeks. So we had to lay a lot of people off. We did get the PPL loan last week, and so we rehired many people to meet the thresholds to have the loan forgivable. Besides that, we were hoping that the announcement yesterday would be favorable to us to open up vacation rentals again, but it was not. So we can't have vacation rentals as of now. You can't advertise, you can't do all that stuff they have in the order. So we're kind of dead in the water again until he makes another decision May 4th. And the word on the street is he's going to extend it and then only allow people in Florida to come, and will not be able to rent to people outside of Florida for vacation rentals. So the beaches are beautiful. Most of our properties are on private beaches, so the beaches have been open to the guests who had happened to have a reservation and stay in the unit. So, but we're running a ship on no fuel. So we'll run out of gas if this continues.
I know you're speaking a language that many of our audience is understanding, because they're in the same boat. And sorry to see that happening. We've been proportionately affected and keeping our eyes on it as well. So hoping that the update on the 4th is a little bit more productive than the last one, and we're able to start seeing a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of reopening the industry. But before I throw to Katie for the same question, Jeff, I actually had an audience question. This is Paul from Orlando Holiday Rental Homes. He had asked if we could provide some clarification on what is permissible at the moment in terms of whether it's first responders or long stays. What is exempt from the current ban in Florida?
Well, I went to look it up and I couldn't find it. But basically, what they did is they exempted first responders, people in the medical field. And I guess they did that so if those people were wanting a place to stay after working so hard or working hours, long hours, that was the exemptions. People that, like I said, we had people that decided to stay and extend their stay, and those people, if they're already there, they were exempted as well, and they could continue to stay. So those are the basic exemptions that you have. But we have heard of code compliance going in and watching cars, watching people coming in and out of vacation rentals. Of course, you have a lot of neighbors that are going to be turning a lot of people in if they're still continue to do vacation rentals.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, and that's a similar conversation that I had with Dennis Hanks from FVRMA. I think a lot of this currently is just it's a matter of what's incumbent on all of us, I think, as professionals in the vacation rental industry, to do our bit to just, during this and after this, build public trust around our industry, because concerned neighbors, if they don't know any better, I kind of understand what they're trying to do, but it's incumbent on us to make sure that they do know better, and that we're working on ways to educate the community, develop that trust, and prevent our industry from being scapegoated when things like this happen. So I appreciate your feedback on that, Jeff, and thank you for kind of sharing what's going on at the moment in your business. Katie, if you don't mind, I'd just like you an opportunity to tell our audience how things are going for you and what you're seeing in your market.
Well, I would say that bruising was an understatement at the first couple of weeks of March. Literally from a Sunday to a Tuesday, we went into complete free fall, where the phone was ringing off the hook and everybody wanted their money right back right now. And then with the interfacing with the channels, who were all emphasizing and encouraging us to give full refunds, we were in panic mode. And it was ironic how we were living high on the hog one week, and the next week we were losing a huge amount of our market share. So I would say that I felt the shock like everybody did, but then I was very intentional in the month of April. We were able to continue to operate. Our county allowed us to continue to operate and considered us an essential business. So I made the intentional decision to cut back to only operating half of our units, and in order to really create the optics that we were emphasizing social distancing and cleaning every unit and keeping them closed off for a couple days at a time. And so now we're just inching back. I also had to let go of staff. I did qualify for the PPP loan, but what I ended up doing is I just became my own head reservationist from one day to the next, and got back on the phones and have been doing a lot of the work myself, and and just embracing the reality that we have right now, that we have to just take it one day at a time.
Yeah, I think
actually segues us perfectly into our first question, Josh, which is, a lot of people take a lot of things operationally for granted, a lot of their strategies for granted. They look at their operations and they just tick day by day. And so I'd love for you guys to tell me a little bit about things that have been turned on their heads, and what strategies have you guys taken a look at and put in place in order to overcome some of these difficult times. I mean, this is nothing anybody's really ever faced before, but we've had to take a very deep look at the way we run things and what success means and what our teams mean. So can you guys give us just a quick glimpse into things that you guys have found, I should have never overlooked this, or some tips that maybe our managers should be looking into their operations, and what you guys have done, how you've done it?
We'll start with Eric on that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Katie kind of nailed it, right? The biggest conventional wisdom that's been thrown on its head is the way things were is the way things will always be. What we're experiencing is really defined as a black swan moment. There's not a lot of these that happen in our society, but things like 9/11 and wars can be categorized where they're not really foreseen, or they're very hard to foresee, but they happen, and they have lasting and massive implications around the world to economies and societies. So I mean, really, some of the kind of grassroots things that are coming back to the surface are, how do we just fundamentally look at our business's health? And a lot of that comes in the form of reviewing your P&L on a monthly basis. What are we spending money on? Where's our revenues coming from? Are they sustainable? What's the health of our ownership base, our owner base, our client base? So if you haven't been doing that historically, and I'm sure most, if not all of you were, but you just take a different sort of focus on really what are the necessities of running a business, what are the nice to haves when we're in our heyday, and really kind of getting back to basics. Katie nailed it as well. It's like, hey, I'm answering phones, I'm a reservationist, and we start to really hyper focus on every element of the business. I've got lots of examples of that, but I know we've got other panelists to go through as well.
Do you look at that short term, Eric, or is it a long term vision as well? I mean, I realize that, and this is probably an open question for everybody, but I mean, yes, it's important to look at your P&Ls month to month, but as we start to grow out of this thing, you know, making sure that we put the new processes in place and look at our operations long term is probably just as important. Also, and I think we've mentioned this over a period of some of the other webinars, which is like, you need to plan for your operations to grow and put in place some of the things that you never had the opportunity to put in place. And so what could those be? So that when you do come out of COVID or any pandemic like this, you're setting yourself up for success and not just going back to the old routines.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I've talked to probably, you know, over 50 managers in the last few weeks, and the biggest challenge they had, none of them really had a cash reserve. You know, not anything meaningful that would carry them through a number of months of no revenue or little revenue. So I think that that's certainly going to be something lasting. But honestly, you know, Brian, I'm talking about, you know, let's reevaluate. You know, I know we have housekeeping costs and laundry costs and everything. We all travel, you know, for business as well, and we hope we do that again because from the travel industry. But you know, are we gonna really look at things differently? Are all of them essential? Absolutely essential. Or are some of the things that we've done, some of the things that we've been a part of, subscribe to, leverage, are they nice to haves, or are they absolutely requirements to delivering the service and experience that we promise our guests to deliver? That's really the question I think we all need to reevaluate. And you know, this window that we've got is a perfect opportunity to kind of dig in. And I've been helping a lot of people dig into their strategy and their operating methodologies.
How do you guys see it, Jeff, Katie, Cam?
Does Cam want to go?
Yeah, sure. Quickly, just piggybacking off that a little bit, but more on the revenue management and pricing side, is the fact that historical data, as of now, can't really be trusted anymore. We have schools shifting out right now, maybe starting later than they have traditionally. Events are being moved left and right and or canceled. Seasonality is definitely going to have implications. So historical data on a property level is hard to trust right now, and that can have implications on pricing. It can have implications on projections, owner expectations that might have come on recently, and even your budget setting and how you run your business. So similar to reviewing the P&L, it's necessary to reevaluate what you really think is achievable in terms of revenue, because just looking strictly back on historical and making projections based on that is pretty dangerous in these times.
What I would say is that whole "if you build it, they will come" mentality has been completely shattered in the last 60 days. Everybody is operating from this fear-based place, and so in addition to turning inward, like Eric is talking at my business inwardly, I'm also turning outward and being much more overly committed to quality control and guest satisfaction. So, you know, I feel like I'm having to work a whole lot harder and communicate a lot more in volume with each guest, and leading up into the high season. Whereas a lot of these people used to make online bookings, now I'm having to literally have a 5-minute conversation with them, and I'm over communicating with them and being very preemptive about things like how much we're disinfecting the unit, sanitation, social distancing. I'm personally emailing, I'm putting email templates in place that address the coronavirus factors when they book. And the day that they check in, I'm also doing a personal letter signed by me in every unit addressing the same factors. And just having this direct, intentional verbal communication with my guests. And I really feel like in the long run, that's what's building their confidence to come and stay with me.
You know, it is very well said. And it's something that goes back to some of the grassroots of vacation rentals, which is the personal touch. I think somewhere along the lines we've adapted to technology, having people in and out, and the amount of communication with our guests and personal communication with our guests has been limited. So I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, and Brian, I would follow up just real quick and just tell you that, yeah, the irony is I've spent years trying to automate everything. And in the course of 30 days, I've pivoted into this mom and pop mentality where I'm just the folks. I talk to everybody on the phone and I'm really actually, talking to them. So.
That's the definition of shattering a conventional wisdom, right? And that's been something when we talk about automation, at least in the context of Cyrus, when we do coaching, the automation's there to help make these things a little bit easier, but you never want to supplant genuine good guest service practices and aggressive guest service techniques with complete automation, because it does just get so much harder to adapt to times like these. And I think that the ones who are adapting a little bit more quickly, like you have, are the ones who did have a little bit more of a temperature on what is effective automation versus what's just making things happen easier for you at the peril of the guest experience. And that's an important scale to negotiate. But real quick, I just wanted to, yeah, Jeff, I was going to throw to you actually. Go ahead.
Okay. I have not been on the phones myself, but I haven't heard, maybe people coming to Florida, their standards are a lot less if they're coming to the beach, but I haven't heard from my phone staff that we have a lot of people asking about how we're disinfecting, how we're cleaning, and all of that. So I don't know if that's such a big issue in Florida as it may be in other places. And we have a lot of small condos. We don't have a lot of big houses where a whole family is coming with multi-generational families. So, and this big part of the season now is not retirees. It's going to be younger people coming. So I think it's that demographic is not asking those type of questions for the beach properties. At least I don't believe so. As far as talk about pricing a little bit, Cam was saying that, there's nothing to compare this to, and there's not. But basically, we had reduced pricing up till March 19th, and I still, if they let the ban go, I'm still of the opinion that it's going to blow up here in Florida. I think there's pent-up demand, and we do have statistics supporting that. Last week, we had on all our units like 6,200 quotes in one day. A few days ago, we had 9,000. So we know there's a lot of people out there looking. Are they booking yet? No, because they can't, and they're waiting to hear the word that says go. So we have a ton of people, and I think that I am holding my rates steady for the summer. I'm not reducing summer from May 19th on. My rates are basically the same they had been all year. So I think that it's going to blow up whenever they let it loose.
Yeah, and to that end, we actually have a couple of really good audience questions that relate to that I wanted to open up. The first one I'm going to direct first to Cam, and the second one, Brian, I actually think you can speak to, and then we can open it up to discussion. So kind of going off what Jeff was saying, when we hit go, it's going to go big. This is from Luke with Bayata Rentals. He notes that many of the OTAs have been vocal about switching to more flexible cancellation policies as a sales tool and as a way to make guests feel more comfortable staying. Can you give some advice on how relevant that feedback from the OTAs is, and how management companies can assess that option as we start to open up?
Absolutely. So I think we'd all probably be in agreement that Airbnb didn't handle that whole cancellation policy well, especially talking or the lack of speaking to managers at all. So I don't want to replicate what they did per se, but for direct bookings, there are many levers that you can pull in terms of getting creative with your cancellation policies, many of which are probably necessary to stay competitive in your market. Jeff, I completely agree with you. And one of the points I was going to bring up on question number 2 here was the fact to hold strong on high season rates, even if it's in the short term for summer and beach markets. You might be a little bit fearful as a result of cancellations and just more open calendars than you've traditionally had at this time for summer historically. But for now, it's important to keep those prices high because we really don't know what's going to happen. And if demand does come surging in, you don't want to be the one completely booking out at much lower ADRs than what's possible. So I'd say keep prices high, but on the cancellation policy front, be as flexible as possible. And you can get creative in terms of when you require deposits, how far you want to allow cancellations with full refunds. The industry standard we've seen from in the last couple of weeks in the most competitive markets is allowing full refunds for up to 2 weeks prior cancellations.
I think those are some really interesting points and really important points. I think if you want to stay competitive in this market, you've got to be open to changing the way you do your business. That includes your pricing models, your cancellation policies, and basically taking and analyzing or putting a weight to almost what's more important right now. And one of those things is cancellation policies. So if you have to loosen up there to get some money through the door, it's something that I would consider heavily.
Brian, I actually wanted to ask you a question on this because we got a great one from Linda Sanders asking, how can you do that when you're dependent on tour operator bookings where you don't necessarily have the cancellation policies and payment terms in your favor at all times? Can you give any advice to how to kind of negotiate around that?
Well, right now, we're really lucky that we don't have to deal with it at all, mostly because the tour operator bookings aren't coming into effect. So from my understanding with the governor's orders, tour operators just won't be able to have planes landing and arriving at our homes for at least the next month and a half at a very minimum. So it's not something that I would really concern myself with. I do, once they do come into effect, it basically reverts back to our old cancellation policies. These guests are coming in, they're coming in on contract basis. So cancellation policies that we had in place with you guys and with the tour operators are also being handled by the tour operators with their guests. Remember that most tour operators are bringing in guests from international travel. They're not local. So that's, if somebody is committed to coming over from the UK or from a European country, they are coming for an extended stay, and it'll be very difficult for them to cancel last minute. We also know that in most instances, the guests that have been canceling have been rebooking. So the ones that are due to arrive, if they haven't canceled, have had ample time to consider canceling, and they're just not going to do it last minute. I wouldn't worry too much about tour operator bookings and cancellations at the moment.
I want to throw
one thing to remember.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Just make a comment. One thing to remember before, summer, May 19th, we're kind of, Florida, we can't rent. Okay, but I have friends that are in the mountains that basically are full every weekend. So the kids are out of school. So you're in almost kind of summer mode as far as rates are concerned. So the families that have money that want to get out of the house, that have kids in the house, are going crazy. So as far as if it's a market that can rent, and Katie, I'm not sure if you've seen this, are you seeing people come from the cities to get out of town to rent? Because my friends that are in the mountains, they're doing very well now, which is probably going to carry over to the summer, whereas it may not have been like that if all the kids were still in school.
Well, yes. I mean, the drive-to market that I'm in is starting to really pick up. I would say that the difference is that people are sort of making knee-jerk bookings. They're calling today and they're booking for tomorrow, right? Because they just need to get away. So one thing that I've done with my pricing and with my social media strategy is I'm being very, and I don't know how relevant this is to people who have hundreds of listings. I don't have that many, but and mine are very unique. So what I'm doing is I'm being very, very intentional, very specific about listing out what units I have available for specific dates. Let's say I have three units available Wednesday to Friday or whatever. And then another very intentional thing I'm doing is throwing out just flat rates, just like an all-inclusive price, a $6.99 weekend or a $99 weekday. And people are reacting very quick. They want something fast and convenient, and even though it's affecting my market share from where it normally is this time of year, I want to do exactly what Cam said and keep my high season rates consistent with what they would normally be. So I'm willing to take that hit now and build consumer confidence and really interface with guests in a positive way so that they will repeat or they will refer, and we will continue to stay busy through the summer.
That's a great strategy. Yeah. Guys, I'd like to broaden back up a little bit and actually returning to the pricing discussion, because there's a few good points there that we've been asked to unpack. Last week we had folks from Key Data Dashboard as well as our internal revenue manager Diego on the line. We talked a little bit about how monitoring and keeping a pulse of pricing on a daily basis right now is really important. How can this strategy be implemented through technology so we can maximize those who are able to take new bookings at the moment, as well as just bearing in mind that operational bandwidth is an issue for many companies? I'm actually going to throw to Eric first on this. Kind of what are you seeing in the marketplace about revenue management and how management companies can negotiate that without impeding?
I just gonna make a brief call. I didn't have it in my calendar to tell you at 1:30. I can give you a call back at 3:30 p.m.
Sorry, there we go. Yeah, Eric, could you just speak to some of those revenue management strategies for us?
Yeah, sure. And look, I guess as a backdrop, guys, I think what we're talking about is a near term, which is kind of pre-vaccine, pre-treatment or effective treatment versus kind of the longer term. Because I think as we roll out into the next 18 to 24 months, maybe we'll get back to some sort of a normal sense of execution and monitoring and revenue management. Current strategies are frankly, how do we keep an eye on velocity? How do we keep an eye on looks to books, ratios, and the tools that are in the market mostly do that. I mean, certainly as a standalone and certainly in combination with your web marketing platform. So I think, one of the things, at least I'm talking about and really working with property managers on, is how do you keep an eye on a price? Because I think we're all sort of looking back, but as Cam said earlier, we're not going back. So everything that we're doing is going forward. So we're really recreating this stuff, and we're trying to use our best judgment based on our historical experiences to help our clients and help property managers understand what they may need to do. But again, I fall back to, first and foremost, how do we get people comfortable with coming out again? Sounds like, Jeff, you're not necessarily seeing that in Florida, but in certain states there's mandates around what you can and can't do: safer at home, stay at home, don't venture your second home, don't rent a vacation rental, don't go to a hotel. And so as those ease up, I think we'll start to see people shopping. We're already seeing people shopping. I mean, you'll probably see the hits on your website already starting to go up for various dates in the next 3 to 4 months. But we're really kind of talking to managers about velocity. We're also talking, by the way, on how to combine. We just had Vail Resorts out here publish a news sort of article 2 days ago that they're now including insurance as part and parcel to their experiences, which is their lift tickets, right, or their lift passes. So I think we're going to be likely forced to look at things that we may not have looked at before in terms of inclusive. I mean, Katie, you mentioned, how do I just put one thing out there, and it includes everything that a guest may need to consider for coming and staying in one of my units. I think that's going to be part of it as well. So anyway, I look at velocity. I keep a pretty close eye on various markets and seeing where people are starting to kind of creep out and look, and how they're booking, how they're shopping, and where the conversions are coming through. And certainly, if a news cycle hits and there's cancellations, we could probably track that pretty closely to the news cycle.
Mm-hmm. Cam, I'd like to get your feedback on that, and then I have an audience question for you too.
Yeah, absolutely. So much is changing on both the supply and the demand side of the equation that it's nearly impossible to keep track of for any property manager in a manual fashion. Cancellations bring inventory back on the market, but other managers don't want to even open up for the next few weeks, so they're blocking off calendars, which is taking inventory off the market. Regulations being lessened can create a temporary surge like we've seen in the last couple of days along the Alabama Gulf Coast that opens up partially on May 1st today, and more fully in 2 weeks on May 15th. Events are being canceled and moved, such as Coachella in Palm Springs was moved from April to October. So all that goes to say it's more important than ever to invest in an automated way of being able to, like Eric said, track velocity. And that is something we do at Beyond Pricing in our dynamic pricing revenue management solution, where we're looking at the kind of equation in terms of quantity of supply and demand on a daily basis in a hyper-local nature.
Yeah. So to that end, with a couple of audience questions, obviously this advice isn't going to apply and fit like a glove in every market and demographic.
Yeah.
So we have a very specific question again from Luke with Vallarta Rentals. His units are high-end luxury, and typically Punta Mita, where they're located, is very inflexible with pricing. They have set rates for low, high, and holiday, and it's quite traditional in that respect because they don't want to see the market's rates driven down by something that they don't have a lot of control over. So how do you assuage some of those concerns about using dynamic pricing at a time like this in luxury markets where it hasn't typically been the norm to do so?
Yeah, great question. When I started at Beyond Pricing 5 years ago, every market worldwide was in that category. Every market was not ready for it. The managers were pushed back quite a bit. The guests were quite annoyed. But education has come quite some ways, and lucky for us, the hotel and airline industries have really done the legwork in terms of consumer expectations for the ability of the provider to change rates based on supply and demand. They've been doing that for 2 to 3 decades. Vacation rentals are now coming around, and I'd say dynamic pricing is probably the norm or majority in the vast majority of markets, although there are some laggards. Apparently Punta Mita, but also places like the Outer Banks, a lot more inflexible, a lot of repeat guests. And I think luxury still works with dynamic pricing. The one caveat there is a lot of luxury owners do have a lot higher expectations for what they'll take as a minimum. So if they have very high minimums, it might basically nullify any occupancy in low or even shoulder season. And so, yeah, I'd say it's still definitely works because maybe new events might come to Punta Mita here and there. Seasonalities do change year over year depending on spring breaks, fall breaks, etc. American holidays not being consistently the same week every year. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, and there's an education process both to the guests and the owners when adopting a new policy of dynamic pricing.
Thanks for tackling that, and I'll get you in touch with Luke offline so you guys can expand that discussion, because I think that might be a pretty cool opportunity for a market where there hasn't been a lot of penetration of that kind of product. So I'll get you guys in touch. So Luke, thank you for the question. I'd like to, just on the topic of pricing and how dynamic pricing tools fit into the operations, I just want to give Jeff first and then Katie the opportunity to chime in on this topic if you have any feedback, and then Brian's going to take us to the next topic. So Jeff, why don't you go ahead if you have anything?
Well, part of what we use all year round is length of stay pricing, and that's at this time is very crucial, because if you're having shorter stays, people coming for the weekend markets, of course, length of stay pricing, the shorter the stay, the higher the nightly rate. So, and in season, to give you an example, we'll use a 7-day minimum price, because in March, we don't want to rent for less than that amount of money. So we can rent to somebody who will pay a 7-day price and rent 3 days, and then somebody else will come along and rent 4 days. So length of stay pricing can be a key factor in generating more revenue for shorter stays. And that's one thing we use all year round, but we get more flexible when it's slower. So when it's slower, we change that minimum price we want to have somebody in a unit for a minimum of 3 days. And we even do that if they rent 3 days, they pay. If they rent 2 days, we will rent to them for 2 days, but they'll pay for 3. So we have a 3-day minimum price, even if they're renting 2 days, and that's something you can do on a weekend basis. So they may not realize it, you don't tell them, but if they're searching dates and they search 2 and 3 days, they see the same price, they'll figure it out. But very few people figure that out. So length of stay pricing is a key part of our rate process.
Katie, do you have anything to add to the conversation on this bit?
Well, all I would say is my coronavirus philosophy is keep it simple. I just think that we have to keep it simple in the short term here in order to make it work. So whether that means, I'm negotiating one-on-one with guests to come up with an agreeable price, and just being very honest with them. I think that's my insight, is you just, in these times, that's the best advice I can give.
Well said. Hey Brian, why don't you take us on? I know we've got some one final topic here.
Yeah, so we're going to pivot a little bit, and obviously this has been pretty challenging for a lot of the industry, pivoting from working in offices, having staff, to working remotely. So what suggestions or what tips can you give our property managers working remotely? What tools have you guys implemented, and what kinds of tools do you guys hope to implement in the future? Jeff, I'll throw it to you first.
We just spent $70,000 on a phone system right before the crash. And we had it up and running for a few weeks. But basically, it tells us for a reservationist and remote staff, everything they do every second. And it pops up the queries. It's email, text-based. We can also do Facebook instant message. All those are on the platform. And as soon as they drop one call, the next call comes up. It tells us how long it took them to answer the call, how long they're on the call. We can remotely look at it. It's kind of like people use Ring Central. It's kind of like Ring Central on steroids. So the data reporting is incredible. So it really gives us an insight to our remote reservationists. And for us, it's going to make me feel comfortable moving forward in the future with remote reservationists more so than we ever have. And we've been remote. We didn't have an office for the first 5 years. So you really have to trust your people. And kind of one thing we're doing is newer people, we're bringing them into the office when the office will be open for a period of time before we let them go work remote. And I imagine that is going to be like a year or longer before we let somebody who's not a reservationist go work remote.
Very interesting. So you guys have focused very heavily on your reservations portion of the company. That's very interesting. How about you, Katie?
Well, I'm a very small operation as it is, so working from home, working remotely hasn't really changed for us. I have a team of 5, and we're all used to working from home and then meeting in the field. We do quality control meetings bi-monthly or weekly in the hot season. But I think the advice that is relevant that I can pass along is just in the way of is in just very, very good, clear communication. One thing that we have implemented recently is I'm doing literally a WhatsApp thread for every single property, and every team member that's affiliated with that property is on that thread. And I'm really enforcing a lot of intentional and constant communication to really enforce quality control. And then, what I'm trying to emphasize to my team is right now, every guest booking that we get is a gift. It's a gift. So, our job is to really enhance their experience and also provide stress relief. This is maybe the first time that they have escaped the house in weeks, and they're coming to our property. So, I'm hyper focused on that piece of it, is just guest happiness, getting that positive feedback and those positive reviews in order to kind of take the long view that, things are going to turn around and we're going to get back to our regular occupancy and our regular success rates, and be able to bring in the normal amount of revenue that we would be expecting by the end of the summer. But we're going to do that by really making people's experiences very, very positive right now.
That's awesome feedback. Yeah, I never really thought about it, but I guess guests that are booking are a gift to you guys at the moment, generating some revenue. So yeah, it's a good tip. Eric and Cam, from a technology standpoint, what can you guys offer our property managers as far as tools? What should they be considering? What kind of advice can you guys give them to work remotely? Eric, want to go first?
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure. Look, it's no secret that we literally have seen 15 years of behavioral sort of change in the last 45 days, right? So what would have taken us, 15 years, we're all now there. So technology adoption is ubiquitous now. Using tools like Zoom and GoToMeeting and Skype are ubiquitous. Where I think, from sort of an operational distribution perspective, I think we're gonna rethink, where we have offices. Jeff, I applaud you. You didn't have offices for the first 5 years. That's incredible. I imagine you might think about if you're not already, sort of what the need is for commercial real estate in the future and where we have our folks. Everybody, was heading in the virtual direction. Now, obviously, we've got to maintain culture and team organization and structure, but there's ways to do that as well. So literally, I'm seeing people look at payroll systems that are virtual, timing solutions. If you kind of ring fence any of your properties or where people are working, they're automatically checked in and checked out if you're on a punch in, punch out sort of scenario. I mean, literally, I think there's likely a SaaS or a solution that's a virtual solution to be able to manage all of the pieces of your company that exist now. And I'm sure we're going to see lots of innovation around work remotely and work from afar in the coming months and years.
I couldn't agree with you more. I was watching or saw an article yesterday that was saying that the investment market has gone bonkers investing in that type of product in the technology space. I think they estimated $7 trillion were going to be invested in remote work type of platforms. So I think that the shift is coming. It's on a much faster track than it was before.
Well, try to just
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, anybody in the call, try to go and find a decent webcam that allows you to project yourself from your TV or your computer. Most laptops obviously have them, but looking at lighting solutions and backdrop solutions and camera solutions and audio solutions, there's such a high demand that the suppliers were way unprepared for this.
Yeah.
Cool. And then on Beyond Pricing has always been a partially remote company. We have about 70 full-time employees, and about half are spread out all over the world. We have employees in England, Spain, Australia, Israel, and then various states outside of our headquarters in San Francisco. So we've relied heavily on a lot of these tools since the creation of Beyond Pricing. One thing I think property managers probably don't use a lot of is internal communication tools such as Slack or Microsoft Teams. We've invested heavily in our Slack instance with integrations, very similar to how property managers add integrations into their PMS. We do the same from our Slack channel. So every form submitted pops up there automatically in terms of new prospects, every new user that signs up, it's tied to our internal admin. Various things are all automated in our support messages popping up there. So it's kind of where everything lives. And if you guys don't know what Slack is, it's basically a searchable communication channel where you can have direct communication with teammates as well as various channels and break it down based on what's relevant for each person in the company. So I'd say definitely check something like that out if you have not used one of those at a property management company so far.
Yeah, Slack's an incredible tool. We've used it in the past. I've used it in previous companies as well. And I think definitely, so one of the topics that's coming out is communication tools. I think that's going to be essential coming out of this thing. Josh, do you want to talk a little bit about SecureTrack and what we're doing in Cyrus with our technology and how we're viewing it?
Yeah, like our philosophy, as many of you guys know, revolves around making things as easy as possible. For you all have already trusted us with the success of your business, so we don't necessarily want to see you guys go and bolt on a bunch of additional programs when you're already paying for Cyrus. So we're already looking at ways that we can start adapting to the new realities. We've got a bunch of existing features that we need to increase adoption on because they're already there to help with this kind of thing. But I'll talk a little bit about those and some of the things that we're adding as well. When we release the post-webinar email with the summary to you guys, I'm going to include links to some videos and some written instructions about our SecureTrack feature. You're probably already familiar with it somewhat from setting up your individual users, but basically what that's doing is allowing you to set up a unique user account for each of your staff with targeted permissions. That way, when you're outside of the office, you can trust that the staff are only accessing the parts of the system that are required for their job. And it goes very minutely into the individual tick boxes and minute features inside the modules. So you can be very specific, making sure that staff who shouldn't be accessing sensitive information or things that are outside of their role aren't necessarily going to be causing problems outside of the office. It also has location blocking as well, so it reads the IP address. It prevents IP logins from certain areas, whitelists specific IP addresses, so that based on where they're connected to the internet, restricts the level of access that they have. Further to that, it's also tracking things like changes made to reservations, changes made to cleans and owner statements. So even though you're not all in the office together, you can still keep tabs on who's doing what and hold folks accountable if there are any mistakes or things that haven't been done to your expectations. So we'll put out the full documentation and video training for that when we launch this webinar to the wider public later on today. And I recommend following along with that and making sure you're using everything involved in that feature. We're also, you saw the episode about, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, we did an episode dedicated to the housekeeping and maintenance. And at the end of that episode, we did a 10-minute demo of the upcoming Task Manager feature. Task Manager, which we're accelerating, and we expect to announce a launch date for that next week, is basically an internal communications tool that originally is focused on communications between you as the management company and your housekeeping, maintenance, and inspection staff. It takes the current service logon tool to a whole different level and allows you to pre-program deep cleans, standard cleans, specific work orders and inspection types, automate that process. It takes that whole communication effort remote in a synchronous fashion. Something that's going on in phase 2 of Task Manager is a staff schedule with notifications and checklists between team members internally. So we're reassessing all sorts of different plans and modules that were already in the works, and just focusing into the future on making sure that they are conducive to success in the current environment of remote work, as social distancing policies either remain in place or just, I think, through the just social psyche, a lot of businesses are going to change the way they view remote work. And even as social distancing is relaxed, there's still going to be an expectation or a new normalcy with working from home. So it's incumbent on us to take stock of what we've already built and what we're working on, and make sure it's as applicable and useful as possible in the new environment. So just look out for some fresh communication from us. I think starting next week, we're going to be releasing a lot more details about the Task Manager feature. And then the existing Secure Track features are already there and built. So we'll share all that documentation and keep you all apprised of what's new.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about Love Rentals 2 seconds as well, Josh, because I think if you guys,
absolutely.
I think if you guys have an opportunity, take a look at the program. We're working with Beyond Pricing, a couple other tools inside of the market. If you're not 100% sure how you should be pricing your unit, you should be looking at your data and your operations. Reach out to us, reach out to our marketing team as well. We have adjusted and adapted some of our marketing messages for our guests, try to capture as many guests as possible to view your units, get them booked. We're also looking at it by destination. So we're applying it, applying different marketing strategies to those destinations. I know Katie is partially or is on part of the program as well. And I think she's doing pretty well on the program. But if you guys have questions on it, please feel free to reach out to me or one of our Love Rentals program specialists. We're happy to answer any questions there.
Yep. So with that being said, we're just about approaching the end of our time. So I want to go back to the top of the panel. We'll go in the same order that you guys see our pictures there on the splash screen. Firstly, let me thank our panelists, and want to give you guys an opportunity. Just spend a minute or two. Any final advice that you have for our audience, and just remind us where we can go to, especially for you, Cam, where we can go to learn more about Beyond Pricing and what else is going on. So we'll go ahead and start with, I think the first picture on there is I'm going to check myself here. We're going to start with Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm working quite a bit on the consultancy side now with Consulting, but at the end of the day, guys, some advice is that we've all been a little scared over the last couple of months, and it's okay. I tend to look at the view from over the hill or around the curve. And we're going to get there. We're getting there. We're seeing progress every day. The business that I love, which is why I'm here, is going to return to what it was, and frankly, I believe even stronger. People are now going to really, really appreciate the extra space you've got to when you're not out enjoying the destination, the space you have to really relax and unwind inside, where at least in the next year and a half, we may have to spend some time, which is okay. But anyway, so I just wanted to put that out there because I've talked to a lot of folks over the last month and a half, and a lot of people aren't willing to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the elephant in the room. But it is what it is, and we're all going to get through it. And I look forward to that day, and look forward to kind of maybe rejoining a call like this to talk about what the new world looks like then.
Yeah,
we'll be glad to have you.
Eric has a ton of knowledge. Reach out to him. We'll put his details up at the end of the session as well, so you'll have his contact details. But feel free to reach out to him and his team. He's a lot of interesting knowledge.
Yeah, you're very active on LinkedIn as well, Eric. I know that you have a strong network there, so we'll make sure to provide that detail so people can check you out.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. So yeah, same thing to you, Cam. Give us some closing advice and tell us where we can learn more about what you guys are up to.
Absolutely. First off, Josh and Brian, thanks so much for putting this on. Really appreciate it. Beyond Pricing allows Cyrus users to connect their account totally for free so that you can see your own data and cool analytics dashboards, as well as market data, as well as our nightly prices, and kind of can compare what you're currently doing to what the Beyond Pricing algorithm would power. Totally free to connect and see all that. So if you do, I know everyone's pretty busy and has a lot of things going on right now, but it is also a very good time to invest and at least do some research on tools that can help your business in an automated fashion, especially when it concerns revenue. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me at Cam, K-A-M, at beyondpricing.com, and I'll happily put you in touch with whoever's best. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you, Cam. We appreciate it. Katie, give us some closing words.
Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you, Brian, for having me. It's been a joy to see you guys today in this capacity on a Friday when I'm normally running around with my hair on fire. I think my philosophy that I have in my life is if you mind your nickels and dimes, your dollars will take care of themselves. And so my advice to fellow property managers would be, maintaining integrity with your cancellations right now. Be very honest with your guests, and just ask them to come back. Be genuinely ask them to come back when all this is behind us. And I think this too shall pass, and we'll all get through it together.
Well said. Thank you, Katie. And last but most certainly not least, Mr. Jeff, go ahead and send us home. Closing words.
Key things: keep looking at your booking curve and your demand. Look at your quotes. How you need to have the tools to do that. How many quotes you're getting, because you may be getting a lot of quotes, not a lot of bookings, but the bookings are going to come shortly, I believe. So hold your prices steady until you see that demand is not coming and the bookings are not coming. Be ready to react quickly. If your occupancy rate goes up for specific periods of time, be ready to act quickly to raise your prices back up.
Good advice.
Great advice.
Guys, thank you very much. We've enjoyed it. I speak for myself, loved having you guys on this session. And as I do every week, I learned a lot from you all. So very grateful for you having joined us, and very grateful for the audience having checked it out as well. Just want to give you a heads up on some future topics that we're planning for the next panels and webinars. There's a lot of conversation to be had about the marketing to past guests, who are your lowest hanging fruit when it comes to who's going to come back first. Like Jeff talked about earlier, when it comes back, it's going to come back heavy, and you want to make sure you have the people who have already trusted you on your side as well. They're going to be wanting a vacation just as much as anybody else. So we'll be doing some marketing exercises with you guys, and breaking down the different emotional and rational appeals that you can use to get return guests to come book again, as well as get fresh eyes from new guests on the properties as well. We're also going to be looking at new communications tools that are being released within Cyrus. So we're going to be announcing next week new SMS features and automation within the platform, so that you can communicate with owners, guests, vendors, and staff across the board. So look out for that information, as well as the task manager and the secure track information that I talked about earlier on in the call. We're going to have some very Cyrus heavy content to help you maximize use of your system during this time. So we look forward to that being the theme of next week. And then the following week, I won't reveal too much, but we've got some great partners who are coming on to talk more about, as things open up, tweaks that you can be making and optimizations that you can make to the actual listing itself online. Make sure that everything is marketed properly and you have all your best practices ticked off. So stay tuned for that. We'll be announcing the lineup of guests for that next week. And as always, it's been a pleasure. My name's Josh Parry, Chief Marketing Officer of Cyrus. And on behalf of Brian, Jeff, Cam, Katie, and Eric, thanking you once again and signing off for this week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.